teacher. I have never been a Sunday school teacher. So everything for a little bit I was a Sunday school teacher while I was in the seminary, so everything I say, take with a grain of salt. What I do know is, of course, in the priestly capacity, teaching and being with young people, and I'm in that weird age group where I'm close enough in between where I think I know a little bit how both sides think. So I'm happy to share with you all the little bit that I do know. I think one of the things that everyone struggles with who's a Sunday school teacher, and that I struggled with as well, putting this presentation together, is that you never know where the people in the room are at. And we know that everyone in the room, especially in Sunday school, are in very different places. There's always the one kid who can answer every question, who are the 12 apostles, disciples, and then the other kids who don't know what a disciple is. So I tried to make this for everyone as best as I could, but I know you all share in that struggle with me. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Divine Liturgy and the ways that I have found to be effective in teaching and communicating some of these things. So one of the first things I always like to do is I like to ask questions. So I want to open up the room to this question. And I'm expecting answers. What is challenging to you or to your family or to your children or whoever about coming to church services, be it a Sunday or any other day of the week or a holiday, whatever? So it's open to you guys. Yes?
Waking up in the morning.
Waking up in the morning. Absolutely, I'm with you. I'm with you. What else? What else? Go ahead.
It's kind of like that, but you just can't get out of the house.
Just getting everybody's clothes, dressed.
Can't get out of the house.
Hopefully not eating breakfast, but still, but all this morning stuff. Absolutely. What else is challenging?
Helping the young ones, singing
Yeah.
God ritual.
Absolutely. I see you have some young ones, and I'm sure I only have one, and I'm told that my wife has a hard time getting her out too. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm easily distracted during church services.
You're distracted during the services.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to share more details, or is that enough? That's
I
enough.
mean, it's sort of a general.
Sure, your mind wanders.
I think a lot of people may
Whatever it
share
is.
that.
Absolutely. I think so too. Even I do sometimes. Go ahead.
Other events or things that are scheduled at the same time.
Scheduling conflicts. All right. One of the things, so this is something that I try to do almost any time that I'm having a presentation or a lesson or something, is I love to ask people to complain. I love it, because a lot of times when we ask people questions, they don't know the answer. Everyone can answer when we ask what is challenging to you, what do you struggle with. And it's a great thing, one, to get kids or any group of people talking, but also it breaks down that barrier of I want to give the right answer. Because when we're talking about what is the challenging to you to come to church, right, there is no right answer. They're all wrong answers. Right? And one of the things I think as Sunday school teachers we struggle with is that the kids are always trying to give us the answer that they think we want, right? And this is a great way to show, listen, we all struggle. And the other beautiful thing about this is when you ask people to complain, you already know all their answers. Because we've experienced it, right? So I knew I was going to ask this question, right? And I think for the most part, I was able to nail, at least for the most part, what our difficulties are in coming to church on Sunday. I think that's a pretty good list. And you'll get the slideshow at the end, but feel free to take your own notes as well. And so I kind of divided up into two groups here, what I thought the potential answers would be, and I think I was pretty good. You know, getting there, getting the kids together, and then the idea of getting bored, our mind wandering, whatever. So in my presentation, I wanted to address both these sides as well as I could. Okay, so I want to start with understanding what we're doing on the most basic and fundamental level when we come to church. Okay? And I think, and as I see on our lesson plans around the room, we were able to talk about a lot of very specific things, but I think sometimes we struggle at looking at the very big picture and the most general sense of what we're doing. So I have another question for you all. I've never had anyone answer this question correctly, so don't worry about right or wrong answers. What is the primary job of a priest? Go ahead, give it a shot.
Our priest just told us this the other
Oh
day.
no, you're gonna spoil it for everybody. Let's see if he knows.
I'll wait.
You'll wait,
I'll
you'll wait,
I'll
let's
come
go.
up at the end.
Let's go in the back.
I don't have an answer to every question we have, the priest don't actually answer first.
Maybe at the end, but I really feel bad. I really feel bad when you get it wrong. So go ahead, we'll let you guys, what do they do? Go ahead, we have any hands? I shouldn't have been so harsh in the beginning. Go ahead.
To help the person realize that they need to have a relationship with Christ.
To help give, the answer was to help a person to realize that they need a relationship with Christ. I would say more than a priest, that's the job of a pastor, right? A pastor guides us in our life and helps us into that relationship. Nice try. Now let's get some more. Go ahead.
It's the preparation of Holy Communion.
The preparation of the consecration of Holy Communion. That's kind of, I'll allow it. That's a good answer, but it's kind of vague. And there are certainly many priests in other traditions, right, that don't have Holy Communion. So nice try, right? Like a Hindu priest wouldn't have Holy Communion, right? Go ahead.
A messenger of Christ?
A messenger, maybe more of a prophet than a priest, right? I mean, there are priests who are prophets, but certainly I think a messenger, more of a prophet. Go ahead in the back.
Pray for us.
So pray for us. I don't know, what would we call that? An intercessor, I think would be the title of someone who prays for people, an intercessor. Go ahead.
Is to love us unconditionally.
To love us unconditionally. I think, hold on. That's a father. That's a father. It's certainly a role of a priest, but it's not the role of a priest specifically. Go ahead, we're going to try again in the front.
I think for like everybody here and that of a priest to be godlike.
To be godlike, that would be a saint. That's everyone's calling, not just a priest. In the back.
Perform the liturgy.
To perform the liturgy, again, you're kind of cheating on that one. That's just the answer you think I want. But we got to be more specific than that. That's certainly part of it, right here.
To bring us to salvation.
Bring us to salvation. That's a priestly ministry, but I'm going to say again, that's part of the more of a pastor kind of role. Some people would say to guide us spiritually. That's a shaman. I'm going to give you a hint here. I'm sorry. All right, one last one.
To represent the bishop?
To represent the bishop. I mean, I think there's a lot of representatives. We say the bishop is the high priest, right? So he's the priest proper. So we still have to say then, what does the bishop do? It's kind of getting, all right, I'm going to give you a hint here. This was an ancient Greek priest, right? The primary job of a priest that separates a priest from other religious leaders is that it's a priest's job to make sacrifices or offerings, right? This is what that's why my primary title is that of a priest, because my primary responsibility, above all the other things that you guys mentioned that priests do, is to make offerings to God, okay? So we're here on this journey of figuring out on the most basic level what it is that we do in the services, right? And we're defining a single term, and that term is a priest. And we all had, and this is the thing, again, I love to do with the kids, I love to do with you guys, is let's take one thing, one term, in this case a priest, let's define it in the most literal and specific way, and then plug that into the rest of the services and the liturgies and try to figure out what's going on. So now that we have a good working definition, question number 2. If the priest's primary job is to make an offering to God, how does he do that? I'm sorry, not how does he do that? What does he offer to God? Some of you I see, we won't be as long on this one, I won't dwell on it. But some of you guys I know made lessons about this, so someone has to have the answer. We offer prayers, absolutely. But there's a more specific answer in the context of the Divine Liturgy. What was that? Gifts? Gifts? Who said in the back? Right? Bread and wine. Prosphoro. Did anyone talk about these? I see a couple that were about the proskomidi service. Did anyone do their lesson about the priest preparation before the liturgy? Did you guys define prosphoro by any chance? Does anyone know the definition of prosphero? It's the holy gifts. It's the bread that are prospheromena, that are offered. The word prosphoro means to offer. So this is the bread that the priest is offering to God. So our main task in the Divine Liturgy is to make an offering to God of bread and then wine. Okay? Then there's one more question. How does the priest offer it to God? And I'm just going to give you the answer, as you see here. The priest lifts them up. Okay? So we've kind of defined three things. What is a priest? He is someone who makes offerings to God. In the context of the Divine Liturgy, what are we offering? Bread and wine. And how do we offer them? By lifting them up. Okay? We got three simple things. And so now we're going to look at the Divine Liturgy. We're specifically, there's me, we're going to start at the Great Entrance, because that's where this part of the liturgy starts, the offering of the bread and the wine, okay? So, pretty close to after the Great Entrance, the priest or the deacon says, "Let us stand aright, let us stand in awe, let us be attentive, that we may present the holy offering in peace." I hope maybe even this one line here has a new meaning to you, just like that, after going through this. The people say, "A mercy of peace, a sacrifice of praise." The priest offers a blessing. "The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God the Father and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with all of you." People respond, "And with your spirit." And then the priest says, "Let us lift up our hearts." What did we say happens in the liturgy when we lift things up? We offer them to God. So what are the things that we are offering to God during the Divine Liturgy? Bread, the wine, and our hearts. Beautiful, you guys are good. So, a little later, here's our priest off of Google, lifting up the gifts again, offering the gifts. And as he lifts them up, he says, "Tasai consonsi prosperumen," we offer to you these gifts from your own gifts on behalf of all and for all. And now we're going to find out. So as he's lifting these up, this bread and the wine up, who does it belong to, guys? All right, let me rephrase the question. Sure. Before he lifts them up, who do they belong to? Us, right? After he lifts them up, who do they belong to? God. And then what does God do with his bread and his wine? The priest says, "Make this bread the precious body of your Christ, and that which is in this cup the precious blood of your Christ, changing them by your Holy Spirit." So this is whose bread at this point? God's bread. And what does God do with his bread and his wine? He changes it. Right? What does he change it into? The body and blood of his Christ. So we can have a little diagram. I like diagrams. We have our bread, right? We have God's bread. Only once it is in God's possession, he transforms it into the perfect bread that is his body. Okay? Then the next thing, the priest will, I don't have a picture of it. At the end of the liturgy, the priest will lift the body of Christ one more time, and he will say, "Ta'ai tisahis," the holy things are for the holy people. What did we say happens when we lift? We're offering. And who does this belong to? So who is the priest offering this time? He's offering God's bread to us. So this is the cycle that we're going through in all the sacraments. We're taking something, the minister of the service, the priest, whose job it is to make offerings, makes an offering to God, in this case bread, wine, and our hearts. And the goal in offering them to God is that he changes and transforms them into something that is perfect and then offers it back to us. Here we have another example. We have a man, Paisios the monk, who offered his heart and life to God. God took it, accepted it, transformed it into something good and perfect, and gives it back to us as Saint Paisios, right? One of the newest saints that we have. This is the cycle of our life as Orthodox Christians, and this is what we're doing in our services. So we zoom out here. What did we do? We took one term, a priest, we defined it, and we plugged that definition into something that I think all of us thought we might have a good understanding of, and hopefully transformed our understanding of that thing. I think if we were to look back at even our lesson plans that we did here, we might be able to look at them, say maybe let's define one specific thing, not that you have to do this for every lesson, but it's a nice method, and then see what the implications of that definition are, okay? Does anyone have any questions at this point? This is a nice place to pause if we do. No? We're all just, go ahead.
So we're making this offering to God, but then we share that offering afterwards. Because we lifted up our hearts, or because we were baptized, or because only we can have that communion,
Sure.
that share.
So what is your question?
I was just surprised making this offering, but then we have it, even though it was an offering to God.
Why do we receive it back? We could go on a long theological thing about, but we could say first of all, in all religions with a priesthood, usually the offerings that are given to God are then eaten, and we could look about in this in the Old Testament, in the Jewish religion, but really as Christians, there's one thing we look at, and that's that Christ offered himself to us first, right? The first offering that is made is the offering and extension of God's love to us. And so, of course, the liturgy is going to end with God extending his love to us, right? And again, the idea, there's a reason that it's bread. Sorry, we're on a tangent now, but that's okay. There's a reason that it's bread, because bread is the symbol of life to anyone who lived in Europe, right? That was 90% of your calories. Bread was life to you. That's all you ate. And so to give bread is to give your life. And so to receive bread then is to receive life. And this is the true and perfect bread that God has perfected, that truly gives life. And so this is the cycle, to give to God and then receive back what is perfect. Simply out of his love for us, right? Are there any other questions at this point? Before we move on to the other part of our little Venn diagram here. No? Okay. We can come back if you guys think of questions. So anyway, so with that, I hope that we have a little different understanding of what the Divine Liturgy is, and hopefully that will give us a little connection to that in our lives, to know very on a fundamental level what we're doing with it, and you can share that. Number 2, the conflict side of why we struggle through the liturgy. Like I said before, it's really nice to ask the kids to complain, because we already know what their complaints are. But the other thing is it makes them feel like they're shaping the discussion too, right? It makes them feel like this discussion is to truly address their concerns. And so we can trick them by already knowing what their complaints are. And even though we've already shaped the lesson, it still makes them feel included. So, I have another question, as I always do. What are the things that we can't do in church that makes it so easy to be distracted and makes it so difficult to sit through? I know you want to answer. Just sitting in one place, right? You can't move around. Absolutely. Makes it very challenging. Anyone else? That's it? That's the only difficulty?
Talk in a loud voice.
You can't talk. It's terrible. It's terrible. I get to talk through the whole thing. It's easier for me.
I'm saying for kids, not me.
Oh, sure. For the kids. There we go, right? We can run, talk, play games, go to the altar, fight. Electronic course, right? We can't do any of this stuff, even though we love it so much. I think that's covered under electronic correspondence. I tried to be as umbrella term as I could. So the question is, why do we have these prohibitions in place, right? Hopefully it's for a reason, and I want to share that with you. Come on, click, there we go, right? We can't do these things because the church is holy. So we have another term that we all think that we know what it means, that we're going to have to define, and hopefully that definition will give us a little understanding of why we can't do these things. So, I have a, come on, all right. I have a scriptural passage here for you, and I'll read it out loud in case you can't see it, and hopefully, as you can see, I've already given you a hint, 2 factors to holiness. We can pick out 2 things that show us what it means for something to be holy. Okay? All right. This is, for the record, the story of Moses at the burning bush. Okay? There the angel of the Lord appeared to him, to Moses, in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. So, Moses is in a holy place, as it says. What makes this place holy? Anyone? What was that? The presence of God. Beautiful, right? The angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flame. The angel of the Lord is code word for God. And then also, right, God specifically says, I am in this place. So the number one thing that makes something holy is the presence of God. There's a second one, though, and it involves Moses. Anyone see what Moses does to make this place holy? He takes off his shoes, right? He behaves in a certain way. So what makes things holy? Here we can click, right? The angel of the Lord appeared to him, indicating the presence of God. And number 2, Moses has to take off his shoes. So what makes something holy? The presence of God. And then our ability and willingness to set that space or place aside or thing aside for only use for God. Okay? We have a perfect example of this in our church, right? We would say that our churches are holy. As we learn in Sunday school, our churches are divided into 3. What are those 3 divisions? Anyone? Narthex, Nave, Sanctuary. All right, beautiful. So what makes the church holy? Well, on the holy altar, on the altar table, in the sanctuary, is the body and blood of Christ at all times, right? So we could say that the church is constantly in the presence of God, right? Is there, so we have three questions. Is there a place that God is most present in the church? In the holy altar, right? Is there a place that he is least present? To say, that's a bad way to say it, but you know what I mean. In the narthex. Which space is the most restrictive? The holy altar, the sanctuary. Which space is the least restrictive? The narthex. That's pretty good. So if we define holy in this way, right, as one, something that has the presence of God, and two, our ability to maintain that place only for the use of God, right, it starts to answer a lot of questions that we could have, right? Right? Why do we need to show up to church on time? And why is it a struggle to show up to church on time? Because that time, in order to be holy, has to be reserved only for God, right? When we show up to church late, we are taking away from the holiness of that time because we aren't reserving that time for God, right? Why do we have to behave in church? Because in that holy space, you behave in a certain way, right? Moses took off his shoes. We don't run around and yell like crazy people, right? Why do we dress up? We have holy clothes, right? I mean, for those of you who did your lesson on vestments, what a great time to introduce the concept of holiness. The priest wears holy clothing that is reserved only for the services and the divine liturgy. What does it mean to be holy? He uses those things only for God in the presence of God.
So,
Go ahead.
question. So if a kid says, yeah, but sometimes we go to church at certain times without our holy clothes on, why is that okay?
You can figure that out. And the question was, sometimes we go to church without wearing our nice clothes, whatever. Why is that? Because this is a great way to show the distinctions in the church, right? The holy altar, there's more sacred space. Some spaces are more sacred, some spaces are less sacred, and that is, to some extent, adaptable, right? Here's my favorite question, of course, on the bottom. Why do our communities spend millions of dollars building a space that they only use for a few hours a week instead of a multi-purpose space, right? Because that is our commitment to holiness, that we're having this conference in a separate building than the many millions of dollar building next door, because that is a sacred and holy space. That's part of our practice as Christians, to keep that thing holy. So what did we learn here? Right? We defined a term, holy, and we got to use that to teach about the three parts of the church. We learned the story of the burning bush, right? Once you define these terms, you can really use them like throughout the year to teach all sorts of things. And it's a really wonderful way to reach out and teach, to teach on the simplest level, the things that we think that everyone already knows, but make it very specific. Not that there is no wrong answer, because there is a wrong answer. And then once you have these very simple concepts down, I mean, the rest just fills in. So that's really all I have for you guys. This is kind of an insight. Like I said, I'm not a Sunday school teacher, but in the way that I try to present things to the kids, the way that I try to present it to you, I hope it's helpful in both your understanding and a little different way to do things. If there are more questions, I'm happy to field them. Otherwise, I can sit down and be quiet. Okay, and Presbytera is going to pass out the presentation here. I didn't want to pass it out before because it had spoilers in it. You guys would have had the answers ahead of time, and it wouldn't have been nearly as fun for me. So we do have a question over here. Go ahead.
My question is, in the Bible it tells us that if two or more of you are present together in His name, He is there.
Mhm.
So God is here.
Absolutely.
Why is this space not here? And the other part of it is, if God is omnipresent everywhere, and the entire earth is moving.
That's a great question, right? God's presence is everywhere. right? But we said there are two factors to holiness. One is God's presence, but then two, the way we behave to keep that place holy, right? We are the ones who decide in a real way, right? This is the way God works with us. In a lot of ways, we're the ones who decide what is the holy place. So when we consecrate a church, right? The consecrate, part of that is, the word of consecrate means to set something aside. When we consecrate a church, we walk around that space 3 times outside the walls of the church to indicate that everything in this circle that we are walking around is completely set aside only for use for God, right? We make that decision. We decide, I mean, God guides us in that decision, but it's a cooperation. We cooperate with God to make something holy. Of course, this room is holy, but it's not holy the same way that the church is holy. It's not holy the same way that the holy sites in Jerusalem where Jesus, lived and walked and died and rose from the dead is holy. I guess that's how I answer your question, right?
I have a silly
Go ahead. Silly question. Those are the best kind.
Why is it that you said we have a certain time slot for God, but then sometimes church service goes really short and then sometimes it goes really long?
I don't know who your priest is. I don't want to know who your priest is. Sure. I mean, what is that time?
It's all church.
What is that time slot for God? That is
Yeah.
the time that it takes to do the divine liturgy.
So sometimes you can speed it up and sometimes you can stretch.
It depends on the chanter and on the priest, but it's usually not that intentional. But I mean, I'd say most places you would go, the divine liturgy takes like an hour and a half to 2 hours, something like that. I mean, it's not unreasonable. But then, it's not just the time that we're in liturgy is holy and set aside time for God, right? It's the time that we do our personal prayers. It's time that we take out to do philanthropic works, right? All these little pieces of time that we can pull out of our life, right, can be holy times. But you're right, that's our discretion, is how much of that time we pull out and sanctify and make holy.
My kids, whenever, during liturgy, if they ask me what time is it, I'll tell them it's God's time, and I refuse to answer or look at my watch.
Yeah, that's something that we were taught. In fact, I'll never forget, I was in this church at a baptism, and I was a teenage, I was in middle school, and I was wearing a new watch, and my clothes didn't fit right because I was in middle school, and they never do at that age. And I was trying to look at my watch, and I kind of had to do one of these. And Father Dean saw me, God bless him. And the sermon that day during the baptism was how when we're in the church, we're on God's time, and we're not looking at our watch, because this is holy time that is reserved and set aside for God. It doesn't matter what else is going on. We have another question over here.
Father, would it be appropriate to teach this maybe to younger kids as a matter of proximity? So the closer you are to the church or the closer you are to the altar, or is that appropriate?
Sure, the question was can we teach this to younger kids? It's like within the church, right? It's like the closer you are to the altar, the closer you are in a way to God. I would say so, right? That's the way that our church is set up, and that's the way that we're expected to behave. Right? When we're in the narthex, we can chat a little bit. I don't know. Depends on your church, I guess. You can chat maybe a little bit, enough to light your candle and whatever, do those transactions, take off your coat, right? That's what the space is for. Then once you come into the nave, you're quiet and respectful. And then the altar is so segregated, right, and intentionally so to keep it holy, that we only let one gender in there, and really, technically, we have a group of people who are set aside. The clergy, what is a clergyman? It's someone who has been set aside to be allowed to go in the altar to keep it holy, right? Why do we have priests who perform the offering? Because we're holy, not in the sense that we're better, in the sense that we're set aside in order to do this job, right? That's, again, so there's a lot of different things that you define this term, and we can explain a lot of things in our faith with very simple definitions of terms, at least in an Orthodox way. And I know some of these, to think of holiness in this way, most of us aren't going to come up with it on our own, and And, but still, I mean, it's nice to be able to do. And you know, for me, with my kids throughout the year, they ask questions like, what, and I'll tell them, what does it mean to be holy? And they know the answer. And then we can apply that to whatever it is. What are we doing in church? We're offering things. What happens to those things? God transforms them into something perfect and beautiful, and then we receive them and live our life with them. So, go ahead in the back.
Do you have any suggestions on how to identify those terms like priest and holy that
I do
may have
not.
taken for granted? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. So the question was, how do we identify those terms? I think that these are a great place to start. I don't know.
That's, I mean, like the terms that like maybe I took for granted. I
Sure.
always thought I knew. So how to be like?
So let me tell you this.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this. One of the great things that we have in the Orthodox Church is the teachings of the Holy Fathers, right? And we always like to read what does St. John Chrysostom say about this, what does St. Gregory say about this, and whatever. What, in the majority of his sermons, are the Holy Fathers doing? They're taking words and things that people don't understand from a practical, modern context and making them so that they can understand it in their modern context. So I would say anytime you see a word that you just take for granted, I mean, think about what does that word really mean, right? The altar. What is an altar? You know? I keep wanting to pick on these, like a vestment. What is a vestment? Like, okay, we say, what are the vestments? The phalonion, the trigilion, you know, what do they symbolize? But even more, on a more basic level, what is a vestment? We could teach what they are, but then to go that next step, to like, why did the priest even wear them at all, instead of a suit and tie, right? And that's the kind of thing, when you have that question, I think like in the last presentation, go to your priest and be like, okay, I have this like really basic fundamental question, like, will you help me with it? And maybe they're very creative and can think in that way and be, you know, well, okay, maybe not. But maybe you can find another resource too. You can give me a call, I don't know. I'm a little crazy, so I like coming up with this stuff. But we had another guy in the back here.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I think I'm not. During the liturgy, whenever the offerings are being taken to the altar table, that turn, that procession is always counterclockwise. And I think all processions and turns in the Orthodox Church are counterclockwise. So the question is, what's the spiritual significance and the practical meaning of that? Why is it always counterclockwise as opposed to vice?
I always feel very nervous answering these kinds of questions in a room full of clergy. What I was taught was that it is intentionally counterclockwise because, again, what we're doing in the church is reserved and sacred time, and it intentionally goes against the clock. So it's an indication of that time is reserved for God. Something that again, this is what I've heard. It may be spiritualizing the fact that that's just the way we do it. I don't know, but that's the way I've always understood it. So,
Just to add to that,
oh, please, thank you, help me.
it also, again, during the liturgy, symbolizes various time. As we come out with the gospel, the small entrance, when we come out of the north gate, unless you're in Maryville, it's the south gate. Come out the north gate, it's symbolizing the expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise. Also, the word of God coming down from heaven to us. And then the deacon would go in the south gate, and again, the Annunciation, that's why Gabriel's there, bringing us back into communion with God. So you have that symbolism there. That's why it's also counterclockwise. Again, the time is dedicated to God, but also we have these symbolisms to teach us our theology that we just look at it as, oh, that's the entrance, but there's specific reasons why we do it.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the reason, right? We have these red books, as like the first presentation. Each of these things has these pearls of wisdom and theology that are behind them. Thank you. It's always good to have the senior clergy to support. But again, the senior citizen clergy.
Remember, my pension will be there.
Because I'm paying for it. This isn't being streamed live, is it?
Straight to New York.
Are there any other questions while we're here? All right. Thank you, guys. If you do have any other questions, you can always come visit me in Town and Country. We always love to have visitors. It's been a pleasure. I hope you guys had a little fun and maybe learned something new. So at this point, is First Lieutenant Georgia here? Oh, she is. Okay. We're going to turn it over to her for our the last part of our presentation here.